Hello, how are you? Very good, thank you.
I guess for many people, still today, so many years after your father died, the name Pablo Escobar is very recognizable. He's a very famous figure, but he's also surrounded with a lot of myths.
Absolutely, yes.
And to explain people who maybe don't have that kind of internal knowledge about where he came from. How did Pablo Escobar start out on this path that took him to where he became one of the biggest drug dealers in the world?
Well, I remember that the political violence from Colombia, it affected my father's life and all of his family and his brothers and sisters a lot, and they had to move to Medellin because there were two parties, and they were just like cutting the heads of their own enemies. If they was just from the left side or the right wing side, it was like very violent times, and he had to go there to Medellin, and he became a very ambitious man. He said to his friends that if he couldn't have $1 million by the age of 30, he will kill himself. And so I know that from that time he decided that he would do whatever he was capable of just to achieve that goal.
And how did he discover the business of narcotics?
Well, he was like smuggling with TVs, radios, all that home appliances, but of course, in those times, it was the United States people who came to Colombia in their private planes to buy the drugs and take them to the United States again. So my father discovered that he could provide the same service to them, and he succeeded a lot. And I have to remember that in those times, the business wasn't like it wasn't like so disapproved as it is today. So it was more easy to him to just go to the United States full of drugs, and nobody will stop him or the airplanes, or because nobody was searching for drugs at the time.
Yeah, and I think a common misconception about your father and other in his line of business is that they were producing a lot of drugs, but that was not the case. They were making most of the money by moving the drugs from one place to another.
Yes, well, my father, I think he was perhaps one of the first drug dealers in the world who he founded like an assurance company in the world trafficking business, because he will assure you that if you invest your money with him, it's just like you want already the lottery, because he was going to assure you that with his money, even if the operation will fail, he will pay you as if they would have succeeded with it.
So in that sense, he was a very successful businessman.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that it amazed me, because there was a time without no mobile phones, no internet. He had nothing, and he was like a farmer, the son of a farmer. He had like no education, but he managed to do all those things in a very different world than we have today.
But when we know what we know today, that after creating this empire and declaring war on not only his enemies that were, in the sense, other drug dealers, he also declared war on Colombia itself. He died, and your world changed a lot. Today, when you look back on the day that you learned that your father had died, what were your first thoughts when you heard that?
Well, I wanted to kill everybody in Colombia. Because of that, I reacted in the most, in the wrongest way. I thought that I was just 16 years old when I found out that my father was dead. I received a call from a journalist. She told me that my father died 10 minutes ago, that the police already checked and confirmed that it was true. So I reacted in that way. I threatened the whole country without knowing that I was being recorded. But it took me 10 minutes to decide what was going to be the path that I was going to choose after that. And of course, when I start to think about my thoughts back in those days, I was really scared of what I found out that I was capable of doing. So that's why I called the media and say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I just reacted as anybody could react, but I didn't figure it out that I was the son of Pablo Escobar. And if I say that I'm going to kill somebody...
You actually mean it?
No, I'm not mean it, but that's what happened. You know, you think...
I mean that people
yes,
believe that. You mean,
absolutely,
right?
and I didn't see it that way.
Mm.
And of course, even the sons of the Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara, the Minister of Justice was killed by my father's orders in 1984. And I had the opportunity to speak with him, and he told me that he understood me because once he found out that his dad was killed, he wanted revenge also. So, being the son of the Minister of Justice, nobody paid too much attention to him because it was like natural for everybody to react in that kind of way, but in my shoes, it's different.
Yeah. If we go back to the start of your life, you were brought up in a family that was wealthy, because when you were born, your father was already a wealthy man, and you had a very, and you describe this very well in your books also, you had a strange, I think you could say, childhood.
Yes.
How was it to be a child and the son of Pablo Escobar at that time?
Well, imagine Jurassic Park in your backyard. Something like that.
Yeah. It's easy, to think that you have to be a very spoiled child.
I should be.
Mm.
But I think that I receive also a lot of love from my father's and mother's side, and that really made the big difference. I grew up with one of the most dangerous men in Colombia. They were all my nannies, my bodyguards, and so I grew up with a very violent people surrounding me. And the real difference between those guys and my story, it was how much love I receive every day from my father's and mother's side. So because they told me they suffer a lot, they had to escape from home, they saw how much pain their own fathers were causing to their sisters or even themselves. They just felt that they were going to die inside of their own homes. Mm. So they found a man called Pablo Escobar that he was treating them like a father also. And he was willing to give them a lot of money to treat them well. And thanks to that, my father built like one of the biggest civilian armies in Colombia.
Yeah. When you were living in this strange environment, you also received, and I think that's some of the most touching scenes in your two books, is where you describe how your father, the way that he showed love and affection for you, and the letters that he wrote, things he told you, and it's very hard when you read those things to reconcile that image. This loving man, this father, with what you actually know about his way of life, all the people that he killed. And I imagine that has to be very hard for you to get your head around also, that you could be those two things at the same time.
Well, I should say that thank God I could preserve the letters, because it would be hard for you to believe me that he was really a loving father. And also, I have to live with that contradiction. I have to accept that's part of my father's life. I have to respect if anybody approached to me and said, I hate your father because he did this and this and this. And I have to respect the other side who approached to me and said, I thank your father because he helped a lot of poor people. And both are the true story about Pablo Escobar. He made a lot of good and he made a lot of harm at the same time. Mm. And in the middle, it was me, receiving his love and seeing him growing as a drug dealer, as one of the most violent men in Colombia also.
As you got older, you were 16 when he died.
Yes.
I guess you understood a lot more about what he was doing, actually. And in your book, you also tell that you tried to persuade him to change his life.
Yes, many times I did that. And my mom was the first one to do that because my father was surrounded by a lot of criminals, and the only way for them to become richer every day was just bring more violence to our home, you know. So we were the only ones who were really suffering the consequences of my father's actions. That's why we approached to him so many times to speak, to tell him, to ask him, to beg him to stop. I remember a lot of times that I approached to him and, look, Dad, I don't like you to put so many bombs in Colombia. You know, everybody is dying, and you could even kill your own mother. I just felt that perhaps a thing like that could change his way of thinking. Because a bomb exploded. In Colombia, we love bullfights, and a lot of people go to see that kind of show. And I remember that there was a big bomb that exploded after these bullfights finished. And I remember that there was a lot of our family members there. So I tried to stop him, explaining him that, and he answered to me, look, son, this is a war, and if somebody has to die, he will die. In that time I understood that, okay, I'm not going to touch his heart, because I'm saying him that perhaps one of his own bombs could kill his mother.
So to him that was sort of the cost of war.
Yes, I remember that 23 people died that night. And in the news, let's say that when you can read news about yourself in the newspaper, you will see how much lies they can publish about you. So it's the only way to see, and don't trust what you see in the media, because every time you see like a lot of different things than reality shows. And I remember that there was 23 civilians according to the news, but it was 18 secret agents according to my father's news. And these agents, they were killing a lot of young people in Medellin. They were called Los Rojos. Los Rojos was a group from the government, and they paid the police to build this group, illegal group who killed all the youngest boys in Medellin, because if they found, like, let's say they found 5, 10 boys in a corner in a poor neighborhood, and they just look at you, how you were dressed, and if you had more money in your clothing than they thought you could, they just kill you, because that was for sure that you were working for Pablo Escobar. Imagine how many kids they killed. Colombia is even convicted by an international court of law for doing that to his own citizens as a government. So we grow up in a very different country. And I'm not saying this to justify my father's action. I just try to say this, to share this with you, so you understand in which country we grew up. And if I call the police, they will send somebody to kill me, not to help me. And
I think that's one of the things that's rather hard to get your head around as a Norwegian, like a naive Norwegian. When you read about a society where there is no meaningful distinction between the mafia and the government, the police and the military, the paramilitaries, all these different groups could be your enemy at any given point, depending on who's paying.
But there was a distinction, the uniform.
But
that's the only one.
But to me, that's like it's a picture of a society that's totally corrupt, in a way.
Yes, at least 98%. Don't put everybody in the same bag, but yes, we have a lot of corruption there, yes, of course. And that really hurts ourselves as a country, because I remember that my father was perhaps one of the most wanted men in the world at the time, and there was a lot of money that the police were offering for his head, and he did the same. Once he found out the police was offering money for his head, he just started offering money for the policemen's heads. So in 1 month, 500 policemen were killed in Medellin. And the sad part also is that most of the guys who killed the policemen, they were all policemen because they wanted the money. They don't care about their partners.
Mm.
So in a way, my father knew, like Colombia was like rotten so deeply, you know, it's like very hard to understand this, but how come is that you find a policeman just asking Pablo Escobar for money because he already killed his partner, just for that, just to see him die for the money.
And in this book, the first one, you say that probably the biggest mistake that your father made was his decision to enter politics in this country.
Yes.
Could you explain why you say that?
Well, I think that that was a big mistake because he was trying to be part of the truly organized crime.
Yeah, politics.
Yes. I think and he said that, you know, because politicians survived in Colombia because they protect themselves, and in our case as a family, I will give you an example of this. The government seized all of our properties, or my father's properties, but they never repaired even one victim. You know, they kept all the properties for them, for the politicians. So at the end, if you can see, it was like a fight for a piece of money, and that's it. There wasn't any fight for justice and to repair the victims, to do something better for them. It's like they are insulting again my father's victims because they should repair them, because they really took a lot of money from my father's properties, and they could have millions of dollars to repair them, but there was not even $1 for the victims. So, and I give you a very good example. I think I became friend of one of the Minister of Justice sons, Jorge Lara, and he never received a dime for just being the son of the Minister of Justice. And even there's a law in Colombia that recognizes the victims, but from the year 1985. So his father was killed in the year 1984. So that doesn't make him a victim. That's how it works in Colombia.
How does Colombia work today?
Well, not better, because we have a law that is called justice and peace, something like that. I don't know the real translation, but the law says that if you kill a lot of people and you surrender to the authorities and you confess your crimes, you will get a lot of benefits, and in 8 years, no matter what you did, you will go home.
You will be exonerated.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, if you imagine that you are in jail, you are a paramilitary, you confess that you killed 1,000 people and did a lot of harm to society, and you will be condemned for 8 years. But next to you in the next cell, there will be a guy who killed one guy, or perhaps someone else, and he's convicted for 40 years. So, in a way, what I understand, the law is saying, if you're going to kill, please be a serial killer so you will get a discount. And that's how it is today. It's not me who invented the law, it's what it says.
In 1993, when your father died, and I use that word deliberately because there is a discussion.
Thank you for using that word.
There's a discussion about the way that your father passed away. A lot of people have come forward claiming that they were the ones who killed him. Just like people are now fighting over who killed, I think, Osama bin Laden or something like that.
Yes.
You have a different theory about how your father's life ended.
Well, I prefer to use, I have found different facts that can allow me to say that my father committed suicide. And there's a lot of stories about that because let's see that in our own family, death wasn't a myth. It was something that we should face every day in our lives. So my father was very aware that sooner than later he was going to die somehow, some way. So he teach me how to commit suicide, even myself, in the case that I would feel surrounded by his own enemies. So he always told me that he had 15 bullets in his gun, and that 14 will be for his enemies, and the last one will be for him. When he committed suicide, we received information from the guys, from the doctors who did the autopsy. And they said to us that they were threatened by the police to change the final report because they put in the report the word suicide, and because that's what happened. And also, my father, if you check the recordings, he was calling his family during that day more than 10 times. And if you check previous recordings, you won't find too much because my father was very aware of the consequences of using a telephone. He knew perfectly that his call could be traced easily and he could be found very easily in the same time. So if you check here, also on purpose, he just stayed in the phone and saying hello to my little sister, to my mom, to me. So I was just saying to him, don't call anymore, we're
Get off the
fine.
phone.
Yes, please, don't call anymore, because I was protecting him. He teach me how to protect myself from, and he always told me, never use the phone, because if you touch a phone in this time of our lives, it will be exactly if you want to die. So for me, it's absolutely clear that he chose to allow his own enemies to found him. So that's a decision he made, and the decision he took, it was because we were hostages of our own government. Of course, the media was saying to the world, Colombian government is protecting Pablo Escobar family. That's a very good, nice 2% that you have hostages as guests.
Yeah. After your father was died, it became very dramatic for you, for your mother, for your sister, because you were also targets for the enemies of the Medellin cartel,
Mm-hmm.
especially the Cali, the family there, Rodriguez
Orejuela family.
Could you explain how you survived? Because you were 16 at the time, you were a man, you should have been killed.
Yes, it's a miracle that I'm here with you and sharing with you all these kind of experiences, because by the age of 16, a lot of people were willing to pay $4 million for my head. And I should clarify that no one else is going to pay you that money, so don't get excited. But it was very hard for me, because when my father died, it was like we had no more power as a family. Everything disappeared the minute after he died. So immediately, my father's enemies approached to us, and they started saying that we have to give them all that we inherited from him, that they were all just trying to get back what they spent looking and fighting my father for years and years. So it was kind of a quick negotiation, because it was easy to say yes, because you couldn't say no, I won't give you this or I won't give you that. They would just threaten us, and my mother was the one who went to a lot of meetings with all the cartels, and I don't know how could she make peace with them.
She wasn't. She was giving away a lot of property, a lot of money, but she was also negotiating for your life.
Well, that was the hardest part, because every time she came from that kind of meetings, I was asking her, look, what happened? Tell me what they said about me, because I knew that they wanted me dead, and she never told me. But now that we can speak about that, she told me that it was very hard for her, knowing that they told her that they were going to respect her life and my sister's life, but that they were going to kill me. There was no negotiation about that point. So for her, I can imagine now that I am a father, how could she have felt in the same situation.
But to make a long story a bit shorter, you got away, obviously, and you moved to Buenos Aires, in Argentina, via Africa.
Yes, well, but before that, I was like invited to have a meeting with the Cali cartel leaders, and they assured me that they were going to kill me in the meeting. So I wasn't kind of excited to be there. I was thinking twice if I should be there or not. And I received a lot of threats because, of course, the first answer I gave, no, I won't go because who's going to be there if you already are telling me what you're going to do to me? So a guy approached to me. I was visiting some of the drug dealing bosses of the mafia, the cartel of the Norte del Valle, and a guy that I never saw in my life, he just approached to me and he told me, look, he was the only one who wasn't threatening me. So he approached in a very kind and also deep and cold way at the same time. He said to me, look, man, why don't you say yes and go to the meeting? And I explained him again, why not? And he told me, look, you are already dead. So the only chance you have to survive is be there sharp, and that's the only possibility you have to survive. Go and see the guys that are willing to kill you. So he really convinced me that it was true. Perhaps I could run a little bit, but I know that I wasn't going too much far away, and I will be dead already.
What did you say in that meeting that saved your life?
Well, I said two things. One of them almost got me killed because I made a mistake. I just tell them that don't worry, I'm not going to be involved in the drug trafficking business because that's a curse for me. They didn't like that at all, so they wanted to kill me. But they just started yelling at me, and I told them, look, I cannot see the drug trafficking business in a different way because that killed my father, killed all of my friends, part of my family, destroyed my country. So what's the good news about the drug trafficking business? For me, that's what I see, a curse, not something good, not something that I should follow. And they answered to me, okay, we're going to let you live, but we are going to condemn you to be poor. That's why we are going to take you from you all of the money, and you won't have a dime. If you hide a dime, we will kill you. So it was easy to negotiate.
Because that's one of the myths, maybe, that given that your father at one point was so wealthy, where did all the money go? And didn't you manage to get anything with you? There has to be something hidden away somewhere.
Yes, there was a lot of things hidden, but I made a big mistake. I trust my father's family, and I asked them, we need money, I know where the money is, please bring some because I have to pay some of the...
This was money that was hidden around in different places.
Absolutely, yes. So there was like $8 or $9 million, no more than that. It was his last...
just pocket money.
Yes. If you compare, yes, because my father was like in the best part of his business life. He was like every weekend, he was earning between $50 to $70 million each weekend only in Miami. So it wasn't too much money if you compare. But I committed the mistake to trust in my father's sister, and she went to the place, she found the money, but she never recognized that there was the whole money, that she just gave us a small part of the money. So she still the money for her.
But Is it in some way a blessing that you didn't receive that money?
Yes, and in this book, in my new book, I thank my father's enemies also for that, because that really allowed me to become a different man, to reinvent myself as a human being.
Yeah.
Because money changes easily the way a human being could think.
And we will get to that. We will get to the purpose of your life after 93 in a little while. But before we go there, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the business model of the narco industry. Some would argue that the core element of the business model of the narcotics industry is that narcotics are prohibited, they are forbidden. And you have argued that making drugs legal and controlling the distribution of drugs through state means is the only way to solve this issue once and for all.
Yes, I totally agree with that kind of approach to this problem, because, for me, if we take out prohibition, there won't be any Pablo Escobar. That's easy as that. No books about him, no movies, no narcos show. And I think prohibition is the biggest act of irresponsibility from the government's side, because in a way they are saying to the biggest criminals, we have the best gift for you. You have the most profitable business you could ever imagine, and take this as a gift, because we decided this should be illegal. So now you will have enough power and money to corrupt us, to threaten a whole country, if you like, to build your own prison, as my father did. So I think that's, if we want more violence, if we want a bigger lack of human values every day, if we want to sell more guns to the world, if we want to be our own young people fighting against each other because they need to control the business, and they only use violence because it's an illegal business. They are not going to call a prosecutor to solve a problem, or a lawyer. So this is, for me, the biggest act of irresponsibility from a government side. And I also understand that there's a big business behind the prohibition. And let me give you a small example of this. Today, it's like I feel sad when I try to fly to Mexico and give lectures to thousands of students and to tell them that crime doesn't pay. And I feel like I'm, in a way, lying to them, because the reality shows a very different result. Today, it's not about how much crime did you commit if you face the United States justice system. It's about how much money do you have. So we can make an arrangement. And perhaps you could save some part from you, and we will, if I am the justice of the United States, they will laundry part of your money so you can live happily ever after. So it's hard to me to explain to them not to be part of the drug trafficking business. Because in the reality, we have these laws in Colombia. If you're going to kill, you have to be a serial killer, don't kill one, because it's not a good business, So that's something very hard to explain to them, because I try to be as honest as possible with the experiences that I have as a man, and also as being the son of Pablo Escobar. So recently, the Cali Cartel brothers, the Rodriguez Orejuela brothers, they paid $2,000 million to the United States government just to erase from the Clinton list their family members. So this became a great business for the governments, because it's like if you start like a drug dealer and you will start being a small drug dealer, but suddenly you became very rich because nobody noticed you. You think that nobody noticed you, but they know.
And it says a lot about the business that the Cali brothers can pay $2 billion to the American government.
Guys.
Yeah, they're just two guys.
Two guys. Imagine you can multiply that for any kind of amount of people you could ever think that are involved in the drug trafficking business. So they let you full your pockets, and money. When you became very important, they call you and they make an arrangement with you. So that's how it works. It's like, let the guys work. Once they have enough money, we will take all the money for us.
Being the son of Pablo Escobar and traveling the world as you do these days, you have sort of a unique platform, and you speak from a position of authority about these issues. Do you feel that there is any movement? Is it realistic that you can have a broad legalization process when it comes to narcotics, or is this like a taboo?
Well, thank God I'm not alone in this, and because Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George Soros, a lot of people, powerful people in the world, have like the same approach. Even Cesar Gaviria, our former president. The thing is that most of these guys are, I won't take that personally, but once they have the power to change things, they don't do anything. Once they end up with their being presidents or whatever, they say, oh, we have to legalize. So it's easy to say that we have to legalize if we are not in a position of power to do something about it. So, and I am an architect, I will not benefit at all if the world decide to legalize, and I prefer the word regularize or something like that, because for me drugs are already legalized. And why I said this is because drugs can be delivered. If we ask for pizza and at the same time we ask for drugs, the drugs will arrive first, and nobody will stop them. So it's very easy to have access to drugs today in schools, even in the shopping malls. You can buy drugs, and people ask me, how can we buy drugs in a shopping mall? And well, we have the pharmacy, and we also have the salt bath, what we use to relax. Kids are using that as a drug, and I invite you to watch a couple of YouTube videos so you will see the effect that supposedly something that won't harm anyone.
I think
to do to a human being.
You can easily conclude that people like to get high.
Well, I think that if you check our story as humans, we always look from different kind of ways to like stay away from reality for a couple of minutes or hours or whatever. Wine is killing more people than all the illegal drugs in the world. Thanks to the World Health Organization, the numbers are very clear. 4 million people every year die because of drugs abuse, and 3.8 million people died because of tobacco and alcohol, and only 200,000 people died because of the illegal drugs in the world. So should we prohibit again tobacco and alcohol? Who wants Al Capone again?
But in your life, you have had access to more drugs than most people, but you have chosen to live quite clean.
Yes, and I imagine as a young kid in Colombia, I couldn't imagine a young kid more close to drugs than me. It was like, and that's why I said to the world that for me the most powerful weapon to face this problem is education. And I said this because I was very well educated thanks to my father. When I was 7, 8 years old, he approached to me and he said, okay, son, we're going to speak about drugs today. And he used a small table like this. He put all the drugs in front of me, and he started teaching me, this is marijuana, this is cocaine, this is what marijuana does to you, this is what cocaine, and he explained each and every drug. And he said to me, and if someday you feel so curious that you want to try some of these drugs, don't do it with your friends, do it with me, call me and we'll do it together. He legalized that day for me the drugs. So I never felt curious because what was the point? It was very easy for me to have access to all drugs, and I was very well informed about the consequences of taking drugs, and I also saw a lot of my family members how they destroyed their own lives. And my father was telling me, look, son, cocaine is a poison to sell, but it's not to take. So I have to pay a lot of attention to the guy who was accused of being the responsible of the world trafficking business in the 80% of the drugs of the world.
I'd like to change topics now. Every day, you told me, you are approached by people in messages, emails, who want to become your father.
That's thanks to Netflix, not thanks to my books, I should say.
But still,
yes.
The series Narcos, I guess for many people in this room, has been like an introduction to your father and his life, and the drama that surrounded him. You have been yourself very critical to elements in Narcos. Could you explain why?
Well, first, if you allow me, I would like to ask to the audience if which one of you have seen Narcos, and I include myself. The majority, of course. Well, I was very critical with Narcos because they didn't hire me. They should. And I'm still paying monthly. I should get at least a free account.
Yeah, I agree. You should get a free like a month or something, right? Yeah.
More than a month at least.
A year?
10 years.
10 years, yeah.
So I did this because I just, and I did this in the second season, not for the first, because if I just made the list of the first and the second season, there would be like 2 books about the mistakes, and I think it was important because I started to receive lots of messages that said, I just saw Narcos and now I want to be like your dad. It's a cool thing to do. And I received these messages from all over Europe, Asia, every continent, every country. And I thought that it was, for me, an opportunity to show to the Narcos viewers that they should be aware that not all they are seeing is the whole truth. Because in terms of marketing, Netflix says to the world, this is the true story about Pablo Escobar. But when they hear a claim, they say, oh no, this is an artistic way of showing Pablo Escobar. And that's not how it works, because I think we have to be very responsible as men, as human beings. If we tell a story, we have to know how to tell right the same story, because perhaps this could be the same story that Narcos are trying to sell to the world. But the results are very different, and I shared with you recently the experience that I have with a 13-year-old kid that approached to me and said, I read all the books, I watched all the movies, the documentaries, and I wanted to be like your father, until I read your 2 books, and I realized that I wanted to be a journalist, not a killer, not a gangster. And that's for me the big difference, and also is one of the best feedbacks that I ever received as a writer. And I think that it really matters to me that people should know the facts that Netflix changed on purpose or not. And I have also to say that I approached to Netflix 6 months before they start shooting the series. And I offered them full access to all my father's archives and home videos, photos, and we have a lot of that, you know, handwritten letters, documents that I know that you don't know too much of my dad, but if I give you all that information, I know you will build a real character about him. So it was very confusing and sad that they didn't want to hire me for that. And I understand why, because they already bought the DEA version of Pablo Escobar. It was the story, and that's how it is, the TV series. And of course, I cannot imagine myself in a meeting with the Netflix people, with the DEA agents, and me asking, okay, when are we going to shoot the chapter where the DEA agents worked with my father for the drug trafficking business, not against him? Mm-hmm. And of course, you won't find that chapter in Narcos.
I'm guessing that the DEA didn't really want to have that chapter in the...
No, I don't know why.
But in your opinion, what is the biggest mistake made in Narcos about your father?
Well, I think it's glorifying my father, because if you portray him as a hero to the viewers, if you show him as an untouchable man, if you show him hiding every day in bigger mansions and the best houses you could ever imagine, and that never happened. You know, I saw my father every time he had more power, more money, he was forced to live in the poorest way you could ever imagine. So, and I was asking myself every day, what's the point of having this kind of money, such huge amounts of money, and if we have to live this way, I prefer to have less and live better. And that's not the way they show my father. And they also show him, he's burning $2 million, like if we don't have wood in Colombia. You know, we have wood for the fireplace. Why we should burn the $2 million? You know, so
Because we can.
yes, but people like to see that, and they go, your father burned $2 million because he was your sister was cold. No, we have no booth to do that. So it's like they exaggerate things, and of course this is the particular way that perhaps a scriptwriter in Hollywood in his own desk with a good view, he was just, I don't think, perhaps Pablo Escobar is like I think he is, but I think they should do a very good research about Pablo Escobar. If they are portraying him, they should do a better job, but they just make a very entertaining TV series, and they succeeded a lot. And I have to say to them, thank you, because you are helping me a lot with the book sales.
There's that, of course. After, I guess, around 20 years, you were able to go back to your home country, to Colombia.
Yes, I had to wait 14 years to come back.
14, my mistake, sorry.
Yes, and of course, I was invited to have a meeting with the Galan's sons. Luis Carlos Galan was a presidential candidate assassinated by my father's orders. He was absolutely the guy who was about to win the elections. So he was killed before that, and I met his sons and also the minister's sons to ask for their forgiveness. We were just making a documentary at the time. It was called Sins of My Father. Thanks to piracy, you are available to see Sins of My Father in YouTube. So I invite you to do that if you have time. We didn't do it for the money. We did it because we believe in reconciliation and we believe in forgiveness. That is not the same thing of forgetting things. That's, for me, forgiveness is about healing, not about forgetting things or stories.
And you went, and you have also met with, for instance, people like you. I mean, sons of your father's former rivals and enemies, and you've made peace with them, and you've even become friends.
Yes.
How is that possible?
It's another miracle, absolutely, because this new book is about not also my father's stories. I think that I already had the opportunity to say and to tell my story from my shoes in the first book. But in the second book, I was willing to approach to my father's worst enemies, so I could ask them, what do you think about my father? What kind of stories would you share with me and with the readers? Because I want to know him better. And it doesn't matter if it hurts to know him in that kind of way. So in the process, I met Barry Seal's son, Aaron Seal. Barry Seal was a DEA informant and a CIA agent that worked for my father as a pilot, and it's impossible to count how many kilos of cocaine he just took to the United States and how much money he bring to my father in guns.
What did they call him? The magician or something like that? He was like he could smuggle anything.
Yes, well, he used to pilot a plane like it was like a bicycle. You know, he was one of the best pilots that my father ever had. So he was the youngest commercial pilot in North American aviation history. He was a really smart guy, but he was like fooling everyone. You know, the CIA, the DEA, my father, everybody. So he was
And
like.
in the end, he was killed by your father, wasn't he?
Yes, in the year 1986. He died in this small town. I don't remember.
In Louisiana.
Louisiana,
Yeah.
Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I had the opportunity once I was writing this second book, I received a message thanks to Twitter. I received a message because I received thousands. For me, it's absolutely impossible to read them all. But something got my attention. It was the Seal last name, Aaron Seal. So perhaps I should see this message. And it was Aaron Seal's message. And that's how I started this book. Because I thought that I knew something about forgiveness, but I can tell you that Aaron Seal and his mom and his family, they knew a lot more than I could tell you. They also approached to the guys who actually killed his own father, and they told them that they would win, and they wanted to forgive them for their actions because they understood why his father was killed, etc. And Aaron also asked me that I have to forgive his own father just because he was willing to testify against my own father. So it's something that it is today even hard to understand for me. And we became very close friends, and also the same happened with William Rodriguez Abadia, the son of the Miguel Rodriguez, the head of the Cali cartel, the guys who put us a bomb in the year 1988 in the Monaco building, 700 kilos of dynamite.
You almost died.
Yes. I remember the newspaper published the next day that Medellin woke up as Beirut. I remember the title.
Yeah.
It was the biggest bomb ever exploded in Colombia.
Have you given any thought to what would have happened to you and your family if your father hadn't died when he did? If he had become like 70 or 80 years old?
I'm absolutely sure that it was going to be his life or our life. It was as simple as that, because we were already in the hands of his enemies.
Yeah.
So he chose to die that day.
Have you forgiven your father yourself for what he did?
I don't think that I have to do that, because when you are part of your own father, it's impossible to judge a guy that only gave you love all of his life. So for me, it's hard to judge him. Of course, that love that I felt for him doesn't make me blind when the times come to recognize how many crimes he committed as a man. But I think that's not something that I should do. That's God's problem.
Do you think your father ever was able to reflect on his own actions? Did he ever show any form of remorse or regret for the things that he did?
I would love to say yes. I saw him thinking twice what he did and that he regrets something, but that won't be truth if I say that.
Now you have become a father yourself. What do you think when your son is old enough to understand? What will you tell him about your father, his grandfather?
Well, I think that in the last book I wrote a letter for him, and I don't know if we have time to read part of the letter. If you like to do me the favor, but I think it's the best way to answer, because
of course
I know that I dedicated to him these words with my soul, with my heart.
Yeah, I'll try to find it.
It should be in the last chapter.
Yeah. I don't have the time to read all of it, and it's in Norwegian, so I have to do it in Norwegian. I think.
Start learning now.
Let's see here. You say, du burde lese boka mi, ikke fordi du er pålagt det, men fordi du burde være den som kjenner disse historiene aller best. For farfars historie er våre historier også. De er familiens, og de er mine. Kjenn dem for at du aldri skal begå de samme feilene, og aldri gjenta dem. Du må aldri la din opprinnelse bestemme hvem du er som menneske eller som mann. For våre modigste, mest ydmyke og menneskelige handlinger er å sette vår lit til fred og aldri til vold. It says...
I don't know what you said, but
I can assure you it was beautiful. It was beautiful. But I think that's a nice conclusion, really, even if you didn't understand it, because it's about your dedication to peace and finding a way to some sort of, it's a peaceful solution to some kind of reconciliation, I guess.
well, I don't want to leave to my own son the same past that I inherited from my own father. You know, it's like I could feel very responsible, and I love so much my son that I will never dare to repeat my father's story just because of him, and because I respect him so much, and I know that he should have the right for a second chance in life. He shouldn't be judged just for being the grandson of Pablo Escobar. And the sad part is that he already started to being judged for that in school, you know. So I'm just trying to do my best with the stories that I lived and that I inherited from my father.
Just to let you know, your name isn't really Juan Pablo Escobar anymore, it's Sebastian Marroquin. But after this talk is concluded, there will be a book signing upstairs. So if you could just do us a little favor, just wait a little, 2 seconds before you leave, so that we can leave first, so that he will be ready to do the signing. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you very much for coming to share your story with us.
My pleasure, and thank you all for being here, for not being asleep. Thank you very much for your patience and for allowing me to share with you my experiences as a human being.